It was a crisp autumn morning when a group of 5 friends, Ben, Mia, Jake, Sarah, and Tom, loaded their gear into a weathered old van, eager for a weekend camping trip in the heart of the Whispering Pines forest. The air was laced with the earthy scent of damp leaves and pine needles, invigorating their spirits as they drove deeper into the wilderness, the city's hum fading into an echo. As the van bounced along the gravel road, laughter filled the cabin, but beneath their playful banter lay an undercurrent of unease. The locals had warned them about the forest, the way it seemed to swallow sound, leaving only silence and shadows. Mia, the most superstitious of the group, recounted tales of lost hikers and eerie sightings. "They say something watches you in those woods," she said, her voice low, eyes wide with genuine fear. The others laughed it off, dismissing her worries. But as twilight began to fall, an unsettling chill crept in, and the forest came alive with whispers. They set up camp in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines that swayed gently in the growing wind. The sky turned a bruised purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. After building a crackling fire, they roasted marshmallows, swapping stories and teasing each other. But as the shadows deepened, a heavy weight settled over the campsite. The night air felt charged, electric with an unspoken tension. "Let's go explore a bit," Ben suggested, his adventurous spirit unyielding. The others hesitated, glancing around at the encroaching darkness. But curiosity won out, and they ventured a short distance into the trees, flashlights piercing through the thickening gloom. The deeper they went, the more the world behind them faded. The laughter turned to nervous chatter as the trees closed in, their branches twisting like gnarled fingers. Then, without warning, the wind shifted, carrying a distant, low growl that sent a shiver through them. "Did you hear that?" Tom whispered, his voice barely audible. The group exchanged anxious glances, their earlier bravado evaporating like mist. "Let's head back," Sarah suggested, her voice trembling. They turned, retracing their steps, but the forest seemed to shift around them. The path had vanished, swallowed by the darkness. "Stay close," Ben urged, trying to keep his voice steady. But as they stumbled through the underbrush, the atmosphere thickened, each snap of a twig echoing like a gunshot. A sense of being watched prickled at their necks. The shadows seemed to pulse, breathing in tandem with the rustling leaves. Suddenly, a piercing scream cut through the night. It was Mia. They spun around, hearts racing, but she was gone. "Mia!" Jake shouted, panic rising in his throat. The remaining 4 stood frozen, terror locking their limbs. "Split up," Ben commanded, his instincts taking over. "We'll find her faster." The others hesitated, but desperation clawed at them. They reluctantly agreed, each taking a different direction, the oppressive darkness swallowing their figures as they vanished into the trees. As Jake wandered deeper, the trees loomed taller, their branches twisting like skeletal hands. He called out for Mia, his voice trembling, but the only answer was the wind whispering through the leaves. Each step felt heavier, the ground shifting beneath him. A scratchy noise echoed nearby, like claws scraping against bark. He turned sharply, heart pounding, but nothing was there, only shadows shifting in the corner of his vision. Meanwhile, Tom found himself in a thicket, breathing heavily as he strained to hear any sound. "Mia!" he shouted, fear lacing his voice. The stillness that followed was suffocating, each moment stretching into eternity. Then, a rustle nearby made him spin around, flashlight beam darting through the darkness. The beam landed on something massive, a hulking figure shrouded in shadows. It stood motionless, its eyes glinting like shards of glass. Tom's breath caught as it took a step forward, revealing a form far larger than any animal he knew. Muscles rippling beneath matted fur, a maw lined with jagged teeth. He stumbled back, stumbling over roots and rocks, desperate to escape. The creature let out a growl that resonated through the forest, echoing in Tom's chest. He ran, adrenaline surging, not daring to look back. The sound of heavy footsteps thudded behind him, relentless and hungry. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself in a clearing, breathless and shaking. "Please, Mia," she cried, her voice trembling. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Then she noticed something, a flash of movement at the edge of the trees. She turned, heart racing, and saw a glimpse of fur disappearing behind a trunk. Panic surged as she stumbled back, her mind racing. She couldn't be alone here. They had to find each other. Ben wandered the forest, dread pooling in his stomach. "Mia!" he called, but his voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. Just when he thought he was alone, he heard a faint whimpering. "Mia!" he called again, rushing towards the sound. He pushed through the underbrush and stumbled into another clearing, only to find Jake on the ground, gasping for breath. "What happened?" Ben asked, kneeling beside him. Jake's face was pale, eyes wide with terror. It's hunting us," he stammered. "I saw it." Before Ben could respond, a bone-chilling growl rumbled through the air, freezing them both. They exchanged horrified glances, their earlier fears materializing into a living nightmare. "Run!" Ben shouted, adrenaline propelling them forward. They sprinted through the trees, the sound of heavy footsteps closing in behind them. The forest blurred around them, branches clawing at their clothes, as they fought to escape the predator stalking them. In a panic, Sarah stumbled upon a makeshift campsite, remnants of a fire long extinguished. She crouched low, trying to control her breathing. The growl echoed again, closer this time. Heart racing, she scanned the area, desperately seeking a hiding place. Then she spotted a small cave, barely visible behind a curtain of vines. Without a second thought, she crawled inside, her heart pounding like a drum. Inside the cave, darkness enveloped her. She curled into a ball, trying to silence her frantic breaths. The growl faded into the distance, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat. But then, a low, sinister whisper filled the cave, chilling her to the bone. "You can't hide from me. I see you." The voice was guttural, echoing off the stone walls. She pressed her hands over her mouth, stifling a scream. Back in the woods, Ben and Jake stumbled into another clearing, their breaths ragged. "We need a plan," Jake gasped, glancing over his shoulder. "We can't just keep running." Just then, the creature burst into the clearing, towering above them, its eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. Ben and Jake turned and bolted in the opposite direction, fear propelling them forward. As they ran, they could hear the creature's growls resonate through the trees, a sound both primal and otherworldly. They weaved through the underbrush, branches snapping underfoot. Suddenly, Ben tripped over a root and fell hard to the ground. Jake skidded to a halt, panic ripping through him. "Ben!" he shouted. But before he could reach him, the creature lunged from the shadows. The last thing Ben saw was the glint of those monstrous eyes, and then darkness enveloped him. Back in the cave, Sarah's heart raced as she heard the creature's growl reverberating closer. She strained to hear, her mind racing, trying to piece together the fate of her friends. Suddenly, the cave entrance was illuminated by a beam of light. "Sarah?" It was Tom. Relief flooded her, but it was short-lived as she saw the terror in his eyes. "Get back!" he shouted, pulling her deeper into the cave. "It's close." They huddled together, hearts pounding in unison. The creature's growl echoed through the cave, making the ground tremble. They could see its shadow moving outside, a hulking mass that seemed to shift and swirl like smoke. "We need to find a way out," Sarah whispered, panic rising. Just then, a loud crash echoed from outside, followed by a horrendous roar that shook the very walls of the cave. The entrance darkened, and they realized the creature was blocking their escape. Trapped and desperate, they searched for another way out, but the cave walls offered no solace. The creature began to scratch at the entrance, claws scraping against the stone. A sense of hopelessness washed over them as they realized the fate that awaited them. Then, in a moment of clarity, Sarah spotted a narrow opening at the back of the cave. "Over there!" she cried, pulling Tom toward it. They crawled through the tight space, squeezing past jagged rocks and damp earth. As they emerged on the other side, the forest opened up before them, the moonlight casting an eerie glow over the ground. But the creature was close behind, its growls echoing with rage. They sprinted into the night, adrenaline surging through their veins. As they ran, they could hear the heavy footsteps pounding behind them, relentless and terrifying. In the distance, they spotted a flickering light, Ben and Jake's campsite. "This way," Sarah shouted, urging Tom to keep moving. They pushed through the underbrush, emerging into the clearing just as the creature burst through the trees behind them. Ben and Jake were gone, the campfire flickering weakly in the wind. The fear that had threatened to engulf Sarah and Tom now surged anew. They huddled together, hearts racing, as the creature stepped into the clearing, its massive form silhouetted against the dying light. With nowhere left to go, they prepared to face their fate. But just as the creature lunged, a loud bang echoed through the air. A shot rang out, and the beast recoiled, snarling in pain. From the shadows emerged a figure, a local ranger with a rifle aimed at the creature. "Get back!" he shouted, guiding them away from the clearing. The ranger fired again, and the creature let out a howl that chilled their bones. "Run!" he commanded, and Sarah and Tom took off in the opposite direction, fear and hope mingling in their hearts. As they fled, the sounds of the forest enveloped them, the whispers of the pines growing louder, intertwining with their frantic breaths. They ran until they could hear the distant sounds of civilization, the hum of the road beckoning them closer. Finally, they emerged from the trees, collapsing onto the pavement, gasping for air. The ranger followed, his expression grim as he surveyed the dark woods behind them. "You're safe now," he said, but his eyes held a warning. "Don't return here. The Whispering Pines are not what they seem." As they drove away, the forest loomed behind them, a dark silhouette against the starry sky. Tom and Sarah sat in silence, the weight of their friend's absence heavy in their hearts. They had escaped, but the forest would always whisper its secrets, leaving them haunted by the shadows of the Whispering Pines.